right.
I see a few didn't
Welcome,
go.
everyone.
Oh, sorry, go
Oh, you're
ahead.
fine.
No, please
All
start
right.
ahead.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Erin Mihal, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping announcements for today's session. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in the Learning Development webinars are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in this program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by Emory University or the Emory Alumni Association. This session is being recorded, so please be sure to keep your microphones muted to avoid disruptions, though we do encourage you to keep your cameras on. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to share them in the chat box. And I'll be monitoring the chat, so we will be pausing momentarily throughout the session to answer your questions, and we will also have a Q&A session at the end. So I'm really excited to introduce our featured speaker, Annette Blum Pearson. As a Coactive Training Institute certified coach, Annette brings her lived experiences, intuition, industry expertise, and coaching tools to the work she does with individuals, teams, organizations, and communities. She partners with everyone from entrepreneurs to seasoned corporate leaders as they focus on value-driven career development, burnout reduction, and personal fulfillment. Annette has worked in product management, sales enablement, solution and brand marketing for over 10 years in both big tech and startups. She's driven large-scale marketing and community initiatives with creative passion and a growth mindset, allowing her to cultivate thriving teams and organizational success. Please help me give a warm welcome to Annette. Annette, I hand it off to you.
Thank you so much. All right. I think that I'm missing a few pictures on this slide, but hopefully they will show up. Actually, let me just fill them in. All right. So as Aram said, I am Annette. I'm an executive leadership and career coach, a proud Emory graduate with a double major in economics and French, and I received my MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. Since leaving Emory, I've accumulated a couple decades of experience. I spent 7 years in New York post-graduation doing sales, PR, and marketing for big names like Forbes, the Princeton Review, and Edelman. I also worked with some smaller named companies, and I will say that those experiences were equally as valuable and as memorable. During and after business school, I pivoted to the world of big tech, and I did, as she mentioned, product management, product and solution marketing, DEI advocacy for companies like HP, Cisco, and Google. I also created my own event organization to bring people together for tough conversations in safe and awesome settings around a dinner table in order to make change in the world. And in 2020, I decided to leave my corporate role to work directly with people in the communities that I care about. I chose to become a leadership coach because I believe in the power of coaching. I believe in the power of connection, and I have experienced the magic of coaching in my own journey, and I've seen it transform people and organizations. So, a little bit of a story. I spent this past Sunday, with an amazing group of Emory students who came to San Francisco for a career trek. To be honest, I was a little intimidated. They were so intelligent, so driven, they were curious and hardworking, and yet they're still college kids. They're nervous, they're indecisive. They think it gets easier once they graduate, and I didn't tell them the truth. Not just yet. They have so much opportunity ahead of them. And as a quick reminder, so does everyone on this call. As we walked around San Francisco's Ferry Building, the question came up again and again: How do I know if I'm making the right decision when I apply for, accept, and go all in on my career after Emory? And I told them exactly what I'm going to tell you. 1, nothing is permanent. Some steps are stepping stones. Some are longer landing pads. And if you make a choice and it's not the right choice, you have the power to change it. That being said, it's powerful to feel like your choices are taking you in the right direction. Human beings are involved in hundreds of decisions every day, both small and large, and it can be fully exhausting. But when we identify and articulate our values, our passions, and our strengths, and we create habits that enable us to align our decisions to them, it allows us to be our authentic selves, to move towards a future we're excited about, and that we can help reduce decision fatigue and stress because things feel more natural and purposeful. You've probably noticed that it's almost impossible to be effective when we're questioning ourselves or beating ourselves up. I'm not saying we need to be positive all the time. However, understanding what truly matters to us versus the things that keep us feeling stuck or unsure gives us the power to shift and control our personal narrative. We'll spend more time on this throughout the session. Essentially, a focus on our values takes attention away from doubt and negative self-talk. When we experience transformation, our identity shifts, and nothing is the same from that point forward. And transformation occurs when we shift our limiting beliefs, we change our perspective, and live in alignment with our values, our passions, and our strengths. So I'm just curious, as I mentioned that, does anyone have any values, passions, or strengths that immediately come to mind? Things that you use to drive the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. Feel free to share them in a chat or just call them out. Everyone's feeling a little shy.
Yes, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or share it in the chat.
And if, I see some in the chat. Healthcare, improving healthcare, kindness, serving others. Let's see, connecting with people with related goals, authenticity, connection, and open communication. Wow, these are so powerful. It seems like all of you have already done some introspection, and that's amazing. We are going to continue to evolve this list, to add to it, and to see how we can bring our values, our strengths, and our passions into creating a future that we love. So a bit of history. In 1997, I got into Emory. I embarked on a huge adventure, my journey into adulthood. I had really big hopes and dreams before leaving for Atlanta from Denver, Colorado, not knowing I'd spend most of the first semester of college crying because the people were so intimidating, the humidity was so terrible, and the fact that I was completely being ignored by this guy, my huge crush. Let's be honest, he barely knew my name, even though he was forced to drive me and some people from my freshman hall to the grocery store one day by my sophomore advisor. Fast forward to 2016, it's 20 years later. I've graduated with my MBA. I have a high-paying job in tech, a cool apartment in San Francisco, and lots of great friends. Only thing missing, at least in my mind at the time, was a romantic relationship. So in order to be proactive and efficient, I rejoined the world of dating apps. Also, along with my sister, I actually tried manifesting. I tried manifesting my perfect partner by writing down the things that were most important to me. I then made decisions on the dating apps and in the ways I spent my time based on that vision. And in doing so, I showed up as my authentic self, and I connected with someone very interesting. You may wonder where I'm going with this. And where I'm going is that it's all about allowing yourself to envision a future that truly resonates with you. A future, a partner, a business, a trip that really gets you out of bed and that excites you and that you are excited to work towards. 4 years later, in 2020, I married that guy that I connected with, who just happened to be the crush who hardly noticed me back at Emory. Not only did we build our family with what I call the pandemic 3, puppy, Peloton, and baby, but I also took a leap, left tech, and started to build this coaching practice, focusing on helping individuals and teams build values-driven careers, collaborations, and lives. So we're going to spend the rest of our time together doing a visioning exercise and talking about what your vision means to you and how you can build an actionable roadmap to your best future. Before we get started, any questions or thoughts? All right, people are feeling good. I'm excited. So you've probably all heard the concept of the leader within, the personal mentor, your future self, or something similar. For simplicity, I'm going to call this person our future self. But if I slip up and say leader within, inner mentor, inner voice, I hope you'll know what I mean. This is the entity that lives deep within us, that guides us when it comes to making decisions, staying in alignment, and recognizing what we're capable of, and so much more. This entity is not fearful or held back by the expectations of others. Our future self shares who, where, and how. They are clear and without worry or judgment. When they share their truth, they're not bragging or exaggerating. They're simply stating what is and what can be. So we just spent a tiny bit of time thinking about our values, our passions, and our strengths, using our conscious, or what we call our thinking brain. Now we're going to let that go and use this visioning exercise to allow ourselves to get to know our future self. This exercise is adapted from an author called Tara Moore, and I find it to be extremely valuable in my own self-work, and I hope that you will too. So when we dig within, we can reimagine the status quo that we often strive to live by, despite the fact that it's been put in place by a society that generally has unrealistic views of what success, happiness, connection, and everything else should look like and should be. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, but if you feel more comfortable with them open, that's totally fine. At the end of this, we're going to take time to reflect and write things down that came up. So if you want to grab a pen and paper or have a document open on your computer where you can take some notes right after we finish, feel free to get that ready. Now, as you settle into your space, take a deep breath. Notice where you are and how you feel. Now, imagine yourself starting to float away from where you're sitting, away from the room that you're in, your house, your office, the neighborhood that you're in right now. As you keep floating up, notice everything getting smaller and smaller until you're so far removed that Earth is just a beautiful little blue and green ball in the distance. How are you feeling? Are you feeling peaceful? Maybe you're feeling nervous. Hopefully you're feeling curious. Now imagine that you gently begin to float down, but instead of going back to where you just were, you're floating into the future. As you descend past clouds, and as mountains, lakes, buildings, cars, and people come into view, notice that you might be in a different location. You are arriving at the home of your future self. It's you 20 years from today. Just take a moment, and I want you to notice, where are you? Where is this future self located in the world? What does the space look like? Are you at a house? Are you in nature? Are you at an office or some other location? Are there any noticeable features on the outside of this space that say anything about who your future self is and how they live? Once your feet have touched the ground, imagine walking up to a door and knocking, ringing the bell, whatever's there. As your future self answers, notice their presence, how they look, how they greet you. How do you feel when you first see this person? What are your impressions of the space that they're in? Is there any decoration? What speaks to you in this space? As your future self brings you inside, maybe offers you a drink or some food, they're going to invite you to chat in a space that they love. What space do they take you to? Where do you go? Notice how you're feeling and what questions or thoughts are bubbling up inside you. As you sit down with your future self, notice that there is no pressure to perform, simply an invitation to be there, to do and say whatever comes naturally. Maybe conversation starts flowing. Maybe you're simply sitting quietly, comfortable in the presence of who you're going to become. So once you've settled in, we're going to ask a few questions of your future self. Now, this is something that you can reflect on and remember. If something truly remarkable comes up and you want to write it down, feel free to open your eyes, but that's not necessary. The things that matter will remain with you. The first question I'd like you to ask of your future self is, what has mattered to you most over the past 20 years? What has mattered most over the past 20 years? There's no judgment, no expectation. The second question is, what do I need to know to get from where I am to where you are? You're asking your future self, what do I need to get from my current state to this state in 20 years? The third question is, what will help me to be my true self? They may answer about what has empowered them, what has enabled them, what has given them confidence or peace of mind. So again, the third question is, what will help me to be my true self? The fourth question is, what name are you called by? Do you have a nickname or a title that indicates the way people think of you, the impression that you have in the world that you live in? What name are you called by? And lastly, feel free to ask your future self anything else that came to mind, anything else that's bubbled up for you. Remember, there's no pressure. There's no pressure to ask, and there's no pressure to receive a quote unquote perfect answer. This is a journey, and one that you're taking with someone who knows you and who cares deeply about you, your happiness, your success, and your overall well-being. As you bring your visit with your future self to a close, know that you can access this future self at any time. The wisdom and guidance from this visit is always available to you and will probably always be evolving. As you leave the house, notice how you part from this person, the last things you see in the space, and start to flow up again. Float into the sky, back up into space. Travel up until you see the earth again as a beautiful green and blue ball. Then start to follow your original path back down into the space where you began this journey. Notice feeling your body gently float into the room that you're sitting in, settling into your chair, feeling your feet touch the floor, noticing your hands, your legs, your arms, and your torso. As you settle back into your body, take another deep breath or two. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Now I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to write down anything that came up that you want to remember. And when you feel ready, give me a ready in the chat. No rush. We have a few readies. I'll wait for a couple more and then we'll move on. So while the rest of the group is finishing up, does anyone want to share who they met, who they saw? I'm glad it was relaxing. It's meant to be. Ah, Aram, you saw a doctor. Is that something that you're working towards? Excellent. So your goal will become a reality, and you are enabling yourself by seeing that future. Anyone else want to share anything that they saw or experienced in their vision? Jana, you were in your same house, only better. What was better about it? And Diksha, you saw yourself as bigger, surrounded by a bubble of love, reception, and courage. Wow, that's really powerful. Could you sense where that love, reception, and courage was emanating from? Jana, the landscaping, yes, always a work in progress. Kirsten, you don't have a mind's eye, so you struggle. That's absolutely so common. And there are so many people who struggle to visualize. They are not ready to let go and just see what's in front of them and are trying to create. And that's okay. It's something that we've been socialized to do. And the more you work with exercises like this, the more you allow yourself to let go, to feel what's happening in your body instead of trying to project what your mind is telling you, I won't say easier it becomes, but the more likely you are to start to see something that you may not have been expecting. So, thank you all for sharing. I want to now ask some of the questions that you asked of your future self and talk a little bit about what they mean. So when we ask our future self, what has mattered most to you over the past 20 years? What came up in your conversation? Did they talk about the tactics and the tools that they've used to be successful? Did they talk about the values? Did they talk about connections that they've made? Notice where your mind took you, where your feeling mind took you when it came to what mattered and what made them who they are in 20 years. When you asked, what do I need to know to get from where I am to where you are? Did anything surprise you? Was it tangible information? Was it learning opportunities? Or was it knowing about yourself, knowing your own strength, your own resilience, Was it knowing who you are and what you care about that allowed them to be that person? And when you asked, what will help me to be my true self? Was anyone surprised by the answer? So this is going to be more valuable if everyone interacts and shares. It's hard, and I really appreciate, Aram, that you're sharing that you found it interesting that you didn't meet at a house but at an office building. And Deshawn, that you heard things that your inner voice was telling you, but you haven't necessarily been listening or taking action. What was one of the things that you heard that sounds familiar that you've been letting pass you by, if you're willing to share? And Vicky, you didn't get a clear answer. Did you get an unclear answer? Anything that you want to share that spoke to you, that brought up additional questions? Often when we're in this space, things may not seem clear. You may see a kind of blurry vision of an office building or a medical facility in Aram's case. Some people see a house that's not necessarily in a place that they recognize, but they recognize that it's part of a community, that it's more aligned with the type of space that they want to be in. Is it ocean? Is it mountain? Is it field? Is it a walkable city where they're really closely connected to their neighbors? And these are the things we want to notice. And Deeksha, you said, I felt lost thinking about the path from my current self to your 20-year self. What about it felt challenging? Why were you lost? Was it that you couldn't see anything? Or was it that you didn't know how to get from point A to point B? Write these things down and notice them. These are going to be the areas where you have opportunity to continue to develop, to continue to put things in place that give you as I think it was Deshawn that said, oh no, it's Jana, the discipline, the courage to continue down a path that feels good, that resonates with your values, your purpose, and the impact that you want to have on the world and on the people around you. And I'm curious, as you're sharing and you feel a little bit vulnerable putting this out to this group, some of whom you probably don't know, may never meet in person. How does it feel to share? There's so much power in vulnerability, in speaking something and recognizing that it doesn't need to control us, that we have all of the tools that we need if we allow ourselves to find them, if we allow ourselves to access them, to recognize them, and to actually use them. So I loved what you said, Deshawn, that these are things you've been hearing or you've been noticing and you haven't been acting on. And we'll get to that. So I'm curious if anyone had any additional questions that they asked their future self. Wow. So Cecil, I love that you did a visioning exercise and you were very specific in what you saw. And then that became a reality. And I'll say that this is not magic. We're not guaranteeing that if you create a vision, if you manifest something, if you write it down, it automatically is going to appear in your life. The vision gives you the dedication, it gives you the roadmap in order to create the steps, stay accountable to them, to make those things a reality, to make that vision a reality. Jana, you are not alone. Sharing with people that you don't know and can't see can be freeing. It is easier to put yourself out there when you're not going to see the person the following day, when they're not necessarily going to ask you, well, did you do the thing you said you were going to do? Or how is it going on your path to that space? And in that way, I would actually encourage you to find a friend that you do trust, or even someone in this call that maybe you're willing to create a relationship with around accountability, to check in 2 weeks. That person may be me, it may be Aram, it may be someone else who you've never met before, and say, hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? Let's just message each other in 2 weeks and see if we've taken the step that we've put out there. So I see more answers. Samantha, knowing that you need to trust your gut and not reject yourself. Absolutely. We are so powerful, and we've been taught by society, by experiences that we've had in the past, to question our own intuition, to try to keep ourselves safe, when in actuality, we may not be keeping ourselves safe. We may not need that safety net. So in order to move forward, how do we use our vision to ask, is my rejection or my inner critic doing something necessary? Or is it something that I can move beyond, that I have the power to control? So the last question is, how did you address your future self? Was there a name that they had that isn't what you currently call yourself? And what did that mean to you? And I apologize if I missed anything in the chat, but I will definitely get to it afterwards and respond and keep in touch with all of you. Jana, and that's okay. There are not always names that come up. Sometimes we hear a name, it may be a nickname, it may be an attribute associated with that person, so that they have an adjective in front of their name that tells us who we've become in the future. And if that didn't come up, it's totally fine. Wow, Sammy, that is so powerful. Pictured people calling you rabbi, even though you're now Christian and grew up Jewish. Symbolic that you saw people calling you something as a professor or a leader, a teacher. I want you to notice how that felt and what it means for who you are and what you offer to your community. Diksha, wow, just hearing your full name, which we don't call ourselves. We say I, we say me, we might say mommy, daddy, product manager, marketer. But when we actually use our name, how does it resonate? So what we're doing is we are creating a future from the future. This sounds a little strange, right? But remember when you were a freshman, let's go back to Emory, and your sophomore advisor knew everything. They were omniscient, and you turned to them for all advice. You never thought you would know that much. And then you become a sophomore. Maybe you're even a sophomore advisor, and your RA knew everything. They knew so much more than you about Emory, about the world, about careers and relationships. And you thought, how will I ever know that much? And then you came to be a senior and you realized, wow, the people who graduated, how much more do they know? How much more have they experienced? Think back to when you were in college. Could you have imagined the person that you've become today, whether that was 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago? The experiences you've had may not be something that you imagined. But if you did imagine the self that you've become, how did that drive the decisions you made? How did that drive the actions you took, the relationships you formed, your willingness to travel through hard things, to challenge yourself? We tend to promise things to ourselves that reflect who we are in the present based on what we know in the past. And that doesn't serve us, and it doesn't need to be that way. When we let our future selves promise the future to us, we're able to deliberately design the future, and by doing so, initiate change in the present. So what you see in the future, what you saw in your vision, or even if you didn't see something in the vision, but you want to try again to imagine a future that you love, a career, a community, a family, whatever that looks like to you, a space, your activities, your health. Use that to initiate change now. So I want to ask you, based on the future and the future you, the life and the career that they told you is ahead, what is one change you can make today? What is one change you're willing to make today? You can feel free to share, feel free to write it down. Aram, just start. Yes. The first step is the hardest step. As they say on Peloton, the hardest part of the workout is clipping onto your bike. Once you've clipped in, you're there. You can push as hard as you want, but you're doing more than nothing. And that's something. So I see start, I see dream more, I see just do it. Is there anything specific? Is there an application you want to fill out? Is there a habit you want to form? How do you incorporate these small actions into your day-to-day so that they grow, they stack onto one another? And when you look back 6 months from now, you'll recognize that you've made massive change by adding up one little change at a time. Yes, accountability buddies, reaching out to someone who's done it and asking them for coffee. Absolutely. It's the people who have gone ahead of us, who may not necessarily be our future selves, but who may represent what we want in the future, who can give us insight, accountability, inspiration. This is so excellent. So I hope you've all written something down, whether or not you want to share it publicly with an accountability buddy that you find in this call or in your community, in your personal network. I urge you to do that and to put something in your calendar. We're all, or maybe most of us, are in front of a computer. Open up your calendar. I want you to go to 2 weeks from today, and I want you to put in, check in on the action item I set. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. And calendaring may not be for everyone. It's what works for me. So if it doesn't work for you, do something different. Find an image you want to put behind your computer, a sticky note on your mirror, or a voice memo. Whatever it is, make a commitment to that right now. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for participating, and for investing your time in yourself. As a community, the more we invest in our well-being, in ourselves, the more we're able to give back and create more happy, fulfilled, successful people who then give back to others, and then to others and to others. So you are doing more than just taking care of yourself by being here. You are really changing the world. So if you'd like to stay connected, I would absolutely love that. I am obviously a coach, and I do one-on-one coaching, and I also do group coaching, which feels a lot like this, but you get to be even more connected with the people in your group, and you get to work through all of these things in more depth. I have a group coaching program called Thrive that is launching in January, and very, very excited to talk about another group coaching program for women who are interested in getting on boards. For those of you who are working on your career, who are developing and who aren't quite sure what's next, you've mastered your professional development and you're ready to take the next step. I'm so excited that Samantha, who is actually in this call, a classmate of mine from Emory, has partnered with me, and we've launched the Light Her Way Board of Advisors program. I forgot to put the link on here, but the Board of Advisors is a board readiness cohort specifically for women to bring diversity to boardrooms and to empower women like yourselves, if you are one, and women that you know, if you're not one, to bring their unique insight, experiences, and value to the boardroom to change nonprofits and to change corporations for the better. Thank you so much for sharing that link, Samantha. We would love to talk to all of you about this. We'll have an information session soon, but please reach out to me directly through my website if you're interested in connecting on a personal level, if you'd like to learn more about my coaching, about a group session, or the Board of Advisors. I have my LinkedIn up and also my Instagram, and you can find me on Google as well. So I hope to connect with all of you. And if you have any questions, we have a few minutes left. Oh, you're muted, Aram.
I thought I unmuted it. Sometimes it doesn't click. But I was saying thank you guys so much for being here. This was an amazing session. Annette, thank you so much. We do highly encourage you to schedule your complimentary career strategy session for additional assistance with Annette. You will receive an email from me with more information about that, along with a link to complete a short survey. And we will include Annette's contact information and all the links for her website in that email also. And it will, of course, include the recording for today's session, so you can go back and do the extra visioning exercise again if you want. Do please take a few minutes to share your feedback with us in the survey. It's a very quick, short survey. We look at it, we share it with the coaches, and it's designed to help us improve the content and scheduling, everything based on what you guys want. So also be sure to register for our next week's event as we kick off the homecoming festivities with the Emory Authors Agora, an evening with Brandon Smith. We'll sit down for an engaging discussion with Brandon about his book, The Author versus Editor Dilemma. The event is on Wednesday, October 23rd. And if you are local to Atlanta, it will be here at the Miller Ward House from 6 to 8. If you join us virtually, we will be streaming live on Zoom from 6:30 to 7:30. So we encourage you guys to attend and look forward to seeing you guys there. You'll find more information about the event and all the other homecoming activities. You can go to engage.emory.edu/Brandon Smith. On behalf of the Emory Alumni Association, we want to thank you again for learning with us. See you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone.